So, hello and welcome again, everyone. We are very happy that so many of you decided to join us today for this webinar. We know that we are all facing different challenges in this situation, in these uncertain times. So here at GA College, we are trying to provide you with content that is relevant, that provides you some information, and most of all, to empower you for the future. So hopefully we can do that as well today. We are very happy and pleased that we can introduce to you our esteemed MBA lecturer, Dr. Aaron Johnson, who will talk to us today about these rare and unpredictable events and how to best prepare for them. So again, let me just ask you, please keep your cameras and microphones turned off so we don't have the noise in the background. And let's have a great webinar. We invite you to participate, to be interactive, and use the chat section. So the webinar will be around 30 minutes, and then Dr. Aaron will reply to your questions. Okay? I think we're good to go. Aaron, the word is yours.
All right.
Move here you go.
Thank you. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Perhaps some of you were planning on joining me to hear some nice stories about swans so that you could get away from all the news about the coronavirus, but I'll disappoint you right up front. That's certainly not the case. The black swan that we're talking about today is, of course, the coronavirus, the economics behind it, the finance implications of it. And then, of course, taking that down to a personal level as to what can we do about these things. So to start with, our goals for the webinar. Prepare yourself for what's coming. Without knowing what's coming, of course, that sounds like an impossible thing to do, but it relates to the difference between uncertainty and risk that will be up front in this first part of the webinar. Look at the situation around you realistically. This is going to be a blend of realism and optimism because there's a healthy dosage of both that we really need as we're charting our way forward through the months ahead. Develop a productive asset that cannot be destroyed. So definitely talk about that. Let me go ahead and start the, yeah, you're right. Quick note here, sorry. Got to start this show, that'll make it better. Thank you. And then think about how to best move forward with the twists that are coming soon. This is where perhaps you're getting a little hopeful. Oh, good, he's going to tell us what's on the horizon. No, I'm not. I don't know what's on the horizon any more than anyone else. I don't have a crystal ball. What I know is that there are going to be unexpected twists coming soon, and there are some very basic ways that we can position ourselves to best withstand what is coming, and in fact, put ourselves in a mindset to where we can try to take advantage of new opportunities as they appear, and that's basically determining what your best step is going forward. So I'll start with this: risk versus uncertainty. We take care of risks all the time. There are probabilities that we can attach to very simple known risks. There's a chance that my car is going to be stolen. Okay, that's a risk. If my car is stolen, we don't call that a black swan event. There's nothing completely out of the ordinary. It's just a very low probability event that could happen. There's risk there in owning a car and having it parked outside. But uncertainty, those things that we just cannot predict them. They're not quantifiable. They're not controllable. And as I'll talk about in a minute, the discovery of the black swan was certainly one of those uncertain events. So let me ask you this question. I'm going to open a poll here, and if you can, go ahead and click what you think. Hopefully you can see a poll in front of you now. You can, and I'm asking you which one, which is what's on the screen as well. Which one does this COVID-19 outbreak seem more like, risk or uncertainty? Okay, about half have answered. I'll give you just a few more seconds to give me your thoughts on that. It's not unanimous. That's just fine. Okay, I'll close this then and show you the results. The poll no, I will not. Okay, there was I'm sorry, there's a default setting that allowed for another 20 seconds there, so did not realize that was in place. So here comes the end of the poll. And now I can share with you the results. If you can see them, hopefully, you can see that 35 of you decided this was uncertainty. 5 of you thought this was risk. And I really can't tell you that there's a clear right answer in this case. I would vote for uncertainty. This is a novel virus. So you say, well, okay, we did not know this was coming. Nobody was expecting this to show up and to really take this year by storm. But at the same time, we do have movies like Outbreak and Contagion. We knew that there was this possibility. There is this probability that we could have assigned to it every year. Well, that's true, but we also have movies about aliens landing on Earth. And if that happened tomorrow, then I would think that we could probably agree that that was a black swan event. It's very shocking. On one hand, you could say, well, there are a lot of animals on Earth. This is just another form of fauna, of animal. So it's risk, but clearly that would be leaning toward uncertainty. That poll there. Okay, and so, for example, going back to the slides, yes, if my car is stolen, there's risk there. How's my health going to be next year? There's risk attached to that. My house, my job, we can assign probabilities of things happening to these things in ways that we expect. What we don't expect, what we didn't expect years ago, was to find black swans. This actually goes back to before they knew there were black swans. This was a phrase that they used. They said it would be like discovering a black swan. In the U.S., we like to say something that will never happen. We say, oh, that'll happen when pigs fly, because there are no flying pigs. Now, it would be very surprising, to say the least, to discover a little island somewhere where there were winged pigs that actually fly. And that's basically what they felt like they discovered around Australia many years later when they found black swans. Definitely weren't expecting that. And ironically, here we were talking about black swans like it was an impossibility. The Titanic was similar in a way. This was the unsinkable ship. The Titanic, it was impossible that the ship was going to sink because they had built it so strong. And yet, of course, on its maiden voyage, it did sink. It also works as a nice example of uncertainty because of something called the hindsight bias. What we like to do is turn around and we look at the Titanic and say, okay, well, this is what they did wrong in construction, and they were going too fast, and it was this and that. They didn't have a rudder that could turn the ship. There were all these things. So clearly, they should have known it was going to crash. I mean, we can look back and see that was going to happen. And that's just baloney. That's a bias that we like to use all the time. We turn around and look at these past events, and we say, okay, well, this should have been clear. It's never clear at the time. It's never clear what's going to happen and what big things are going to upend our life, our work, and the sorts of things that we have come to count on. And that gets me thinking about something called the turkey problem from the book, The Black Swan. So The Black Swan is a book written by Taleb Nassim years ago. And he was highlighting this idea of, there's uncertainty out there. There are these things that show up that you're just not going to expect. And we don't appreciate it enough. We don't build it into our models enough. So as you would ask a turkey, you'd say, okay, for 1,000 days, for 3 years, you've been living in this little place, and this farmer, this butcher, this guy has been bringing you food every day. The sun comes up, the sun goes down, your food shows up. What sort of risk or uncertainty do you face? And the turkey, if it could speak, would say, well, I don't see a lot of uncertainty. He brings me my food every day, and sometimes the time varies. It's usually in the morning, but there's this normal distribution of times around the mean. where I get my food. So that's the sort of risk that I encounter. So I face that sort of risk, and tomorrow I really don't know when my food's going to arrive, but I know it's going to be somewhere in this range of accepted values. But the next day is day 1001. It's Thanksgiving. And of course, the farmer does not come out with food for the turkey. He comes out with an axe. And the turkey all of a sudden realizes, well, I have not appreciated the uncertainty that exists and the different possibilities that I might be facing in my future. So there's uncertainty. I'll ask you a second question now, a related question. Now that we have COVID-19, I will ask you the question of, sorry, taking a little bit longer than I was hoping. A few clicks there. How would you characterize the likelihood that you will eventually be affected with COVID-19, that you are going to contract it, become COVID-19 positive? Okay, just a few more seconds. Most of you have answered. And here we go. Here's the results of this poll. And yes, the numbers switch. And I agree. And now that COVID-19 exists, we know that it's a novel virus. They have some idea of what it looks like, how it travels, how long it survives on surfaces. We have these different pieces of factual evidence that we can use to try to estimate the probability that I'm going to be affected by the virus. So that is certainly a risk at this point. But there is uncertainty attached yet to COVID-19, as I'm going to finish with. But certainly, at this point, now that we're looking at the virus, we can apply risk models, and that's exactly what we're doing. All of the things that you heard about us flattening the curve, trials of vaccines and other drugs, what happened in 1918, what's the parallels to today, does warmer weather help, all of these things. There's still a lot of unknowns, but we can apply this in a probabilistic framework now and turn this bit of uncertainty that we got hit with into now risk. And that's really the key, is that if you can turn uncertainty into risk, at least to a degree, you can manage that risk. We're not going to go through this idea of transmission. I don't want to get into any of the medical stuff for one very clear reason, and that is I am not a medical doctor, and I encourage you to only listen to those who are medical doctors in talking about this virus. So I'm going to move on to crises, because this is clearly a crisis that we're in. If you see what's going on in business and various sectors of business, you know that we're having a little bit of I shouldn't say a little bit of a liquidity crunch, and a liquidity crisis is likely coming. Airlines are struggling because all of the planes are on the ground, or most of them. So how is this crisis then related to past crises? Are there similarities? Are there differences? And the answer is yes, of course. Every crisis kind of comes without a lot of warning. There are always people who turn around again with hindsight bias and say, look, I posted this article. I said this is going to happen. But if you look out into the news, you'll see that people are posting these articles all the time. It never stops. So at some point, somebody's going to be able to turn around and say, I timed it right. Always the case. In the Great Depression, we had too much leverage, and then we had bad policies that affected the economy going forward for years. And we learned from those mistakes, at least to a degree. And I just handpicked these three, of course. More recently, about 12 years ago, we entered a financial crisis. And that was mainly a liquidity crisis. And so at the time, in 2008, I was not actually that worried. There was a lot of debt. Leverage was a problem. Because we had interest rates so low for so long, there was a lot of malinvestment. And so once a recession came, sometimes you hear a recession described as companies clinging to the branch of a tree. And a recession shakes the branch to see which weak ones are going to fall off and which ones are going to stay. That's what a recession does. And so when you have all of this extra debt and leverage and malinvestment, of course, when a recession comes, it's going to have to clear the way for the most profitable businesses to remain. That's a messy process. Markets are good at organizing things, but it is a messy process to go through a recession and to come out on the other end of it. And I think a lot of people remember the 2008 crisis as being fairly short. It was about par as far as recessions go. A little bit longer than average, but if you look at the markets, the market peak prior to the crisis was actually in late 2007. And the bottom did not occur in 2008. It actually occurred in early 2009. So it took over a year for the markets to bottom out. And I don't think that this current situation is going to be that much different in terms of the timing. We had a sharp downturn, yes. But again, we came into this thing with a lot of debt, a lot of leverage, following low interest rates, similar to the 2008 financial crisis. The main difference that bothers me with this crisis is that there is a real loss. In macroeconomic courses, I like to say that the economy is a pie, basically, and to say it's very, very simple view of the economy. It's a pie, and we all go out and we work to create pie, and then we go home and we eat the pie. Okay, so in the 2008 crisis, there were some companies going under, and there was some temporary loss of the pie makers as people were shifting from one thing to the other. But in this case, there is a large systemic drop in the people that are able to go out and do what they normally do. So there is a real loss of our income, of our production, which we measure with GDP. So there's most certainly going to be a contraction. Now, how long is this going to be? How protracted is it going to be? Again, if you ask different economists, you get an idea from this is just a storm. It's a very small storm, and we're going to jump right back up, to this is the start of the next Great Depression. I don't buy either extreme. With the limited time we have, we're not going to get into a lot of the reasons why. I just don't buy either extreme. We're facing a crisis. There's no doubt about that. There's going to be a period of recovery that's not going to be over by summer, I don't believe. But it's not going to be a prolonged depression. I can't imagine that, because we are all anxious to get back to work and to get back on track. So let me ask you this now. I'll show you the stock prices for the U.S. markets. This is the past year. So you can see that the stock prices have fallen. So I'll ask you, how would you value these markets now? Are we looking at markets that are relatively overvalued, undervalued, or are they fairly valued? So here's that question. And very quickly, all three categories were marked, which is just fine. I expect to have a wide variance of answers here. And I suppose, in fairness, I should have put option D for I have no clue, which is probably the best answer of all of them. Give me your best thought. Certainly, you're getting fed a lot of ideas from people in finance world as to where markets are and where they're going. A few more seconds now and it will close, and I'll show you the results. There they are. So a pretty even split. We have 13 saying the markets are overvalued. The largest response was fairly valued, and a few saying undervalued. Yeah, there are different behavioral biases we can apply to this. But in a finance course, I would like to start with a question of why do you have a business in the first place? Why would you want to have a business? And of course, the answer that comes up very quickly is to make money, to earn a net income. Exactly right. So we start with that. We start with the idea of earnings and how much do you want to pay for a dollar of earnings. In finance, we call that the PE ratio, the price to earnings ratio. Would you like to pay a lot for a dollar of earnings or a little? Well, logically, I'd like to pay a little. Yes, that's right, because if you paid less, then you'd have a bigger return, essentially. And so let's look at history. Let's see where they are. Here is what we call the Shiller price earnings ratio. I could put up the basic market PE ratio, but it gets a little bit messy and needs some more discussion. The Shiller PE uses 10 years of adjusted earnings and looks at the current price level of stocks relative to those earnings. And if it's hard to see exactly what the numbers are, I'll just tell you that right in the middle, that line the blue line seems to always come back to and is centered around for over 100 years is 15. It's about 15. Because if you pay $15 for a dollar of earnings, then you're getting a dollar based on your $15 investment. It's about a 7% return without dividends, which is very fair given the long-run average of returns for stocks. So 15 is kind of gravity, where the stock prices always come back to. So now you can see, oh, look what happened in 2000. That biggest bubble you see up there, that's 2000. In 2008, you don't really see the bubble so much because, again, we're using 10 years of earnings, but you can see the great decline that happened from late 7 to 2009. But look where we are today. And in fact, this was a few days ago when I made the slideshow. I just checked earlier, and the Shiller PE, after a nice day in the markets the last couple of days, it's back up over 25. Okay, so this is just something to consider. If you say, okay, COVID hit, it hit businesses hard. This has been a really rough year, but thank heavens we finally got a bottom in the market. Things are coming back. Things are coming back up, and everything's going to be good. Well, I can't guarantee that. And all I can tell you is that we really have no business being around a PE of 25. Again, the long-run average is 15. Now, here's a simple math. How do you get from 25 to 50? You go down by 10, which is 40% where we are. This is where I wish we were in a classroom where I could hear what the reactions are right away in real time. Because you might ask, oh, wait a minute, are you predicting a 40% decline? No, I'm not, because markets can stay wherever they decide to. I have a pen here, and maybe after my talk, you decide that you want to collectively bid on this pen and buy it, and somebody wants to pay $100, $200, $300. You can decide that this pen's worth $1,000. You guys can just go into a crazy auction. That's what a bubble is. But eventually, at some point, you should say, it's a pen. It's a used pen. It's not worth $1,000. And eventually, we're going to say that about stocks as well. They're not worth 25 times earnings. They shouldn't be in normal times. And this is really the punchline to why I wanted to show this. In normal times, they should not be worth 25. But with all of the risk and uncertainty that we're facing right now, going forward for the rest of 2020, we have no business being there. So no, I do not have long positions in equities. So now we get down to you. Perhaps the economics is a little too abstract. Perhaps financial markets are not something that you really want to look at. So let's get back to you. in very limited time that we have left, and I'm sorry I lost my clock here. Not sure how much time we have left, actually. This was poor planning on my part. What I want to do is talk with you about a very simple study that researchers did years ago, asking this question, okay? How much money do you need to have everything that you really need? Are you satisfied with your income, or do you need more? Okay? They asked this of people making $30,000 a year, and on average they said, of course not. I'm just living paycheck to paycheck. I'm barely getting by. I need $50,000 a year. They asked people making $50,000 a year, are you satisfied? And they said on average, no, I'm barely getting by. If I had $80,000 a year for average, then I would have everything that I want. Okay, so they found people making $80,000 a year. They asked them the exact same question. Are you satisfied? Are you happy with what you have? And incredibly, people making $80,000 said, no, I have to tune up my Lexus, and the golf course fees are going up, and my maid is wanting a raise. I don't know what else to spend your money on. So on average, we need $120,000 a year. They're always wanting more. So I'm going to ask you this question, a similar related question, is could you survive right now? Are you living right up against the edge, paycheck to paycheck? Could you survive if your income dropped by 20%? Yes or no? And the survey says that most of you are right. How can you say right? I say right because there's only one right answer to that question. Could you survive if your income dropped by 20%? Of course you could, because there are people right now surviving on 20% less than what you make. There are people all along the continuum. You don't just blow away in the wind if your income is cut. You survive on it. Figure out how to survive on less. Okay? So what we tend to do is we say, all right, I'm going to let my employer control what my lifestyle is. I'm going to live right up on the edge. And if I get a little bit more money, there's this I want to upgrade, then I want to upgrade this, then I want to upgrade this. And if you're always reaching forward, this is why I have the dog on a leash. If you're reaching forward like a dog on a leash, then you never have enough. And marketers are always out there telling you, come on, you can do it, you can do it. Here's some fresh meat, just stretch a little further. Stretch, you got to upgrade this. What you have isn't good enough. And so we're just stretching like mad to try to get to that next thing. And by doing that, of course, we are not prepared. We don't have any margin of safety for when uncertainty hits. And too many people are like that. And immediately after having to stay at home, having to adjust work and possibly lose a wage earner in a home, many families around the world are struggling immensely. Certainly no joke here. But my point is, if you live within your means, if you live on less, figure out how to live on 20% less, 10% less, something like this, then you don't have this strain. You don't have this stress. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen to your job and your industry next? I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is that if you have this 6-month vacation planned, if you have those assets set aside, you're ready for whatever comes, whatever happens. Okay? And again, this is part of a larger discussion. I want to move forward from that. But one last thing from the world of finance is the idea of diversification. So diversification is one of those boring subjects, I guess, in finance where we talk about, we have correlation, covariance, and all these different things that we calculate to say, how do you have a diversified portfolio? The concept of diversification is a lot simpler and a lot more personal than that. If you are working for a certain company, you should have no investment in that company whatsoever. You should be ready for something else. The lessons of Enron, all these years later, are still ringing in my ears when I hear about the workers of Enron who went bust, a corporation that went under years ago, and all of the employees of Enron actually had their retirement savings in a company plan which was invested 100% in Enron. So not only did they lose their livelihood, they lost their savings all in one fell swoop. It was terrible. Okay? In this age of uncertainty, what I want to tell you is just to think about your own field, whatever you are working in, and consider what would you do? Treasure hunt for a minute. Treasure hunt your options. The second line there means what would you do if your job was gone tomorrow? Right? There's a story about a football player that actually got injured, and he wasn't sure if he would ever play again. And he was so depressed about this. A psychologist asked him this. Treasure hunt. What if you could never play again? What would you do? Make a list. See how many things you could come up with. And after forcing himself to think about it for a couple of weeks, he ended up almost hoping that he wouldn't be able to play again because he had come up with all these other options. There are a myriad of options out there for you to choose from. We just have to look a little bit more broadly. And if you do that, of course, you come up with a plan B, a plan C, then you are ready for whatever is going to come up. Examples today, hairdressers cannot do their work because in a lot of countries, like where we're locked down, they cannot meet with clients right now. So instead, they're sewing masks, right? Because that's what's in demand. So you shift, you pivot, okay? This idea was made popular in 1998 by this book, Who Moved My Cheese? And it was this kind of fun little book. It was written like a children's story about these mice that went to get their cheese every day, kind of like the turkey. And one day the cheese moved. And a couple mice sit around and say, oh, when is my cheese coming back? And the other mice said, well, let's go look for more. Let's go find what we can find. Okay, that's how you survive. You diversify. You try to find those things which you can apply to the labor market no matter what happens. And a great example of that, coming back to one of the goals of this webinar, to build an asset that cannot be destroyed. What asset cannot be destroyed? And that's your education. The things that you know. What am I able to do? There are a lot of different ways that you can enhance your skill set. Some with formal education, some with simple online courses. You get into coding or some of these basic things. I think it was really nice that we spent the first couple minutes of this webinar having this little discussion about why are we using WebEx? Why not Microsoft Teams? Well, why not Zoom? Why not Google Hangout? Because these things are changing, and we're all trying to figure out, how do I do this? How do I deliver the content that I need to deliver better? My field is education. Okay, so I can look at my cheese as being, I have students in a classroom. When do I get back to the classroom? But what about this? What if I never do? What if something fundamental is changing now? We don't know. So I'm going to end this webinar with just this, a very, let's say, a kind of a pessimistic view of what could happen, and yet with some optimism of what you can do about it. Because what my concern is, we all have this very narrow view of where we are and where we're going. Things are going to recover. We're going to come up on the back end of this, and we're going to go back to exactly where we were before. Well, that's a lot to ask. We don't know that. We absolutely don't know that. Here are some things. What about nuclear war? What about an asteroid possibly hitting? What about other natural disasters? What if COVID-19, what if we try to treat that with a drug? It mutates, and we have COVID-20 in a few months. These are awful thoughts, but this is the sort of uncertainty that we always have. We cannot fall into the trap of thinking, okay, we're in this special situation, everything else is going to be fine while we deal with this one situation. That's not how life works. So we do not know what's coming around the corner. We don't know what twists and turns are coming next. What we can do, though, what we can do is take a look at our own skill set and say, how can I enhance it? How can I better diversify? How can I shift nimbly from one thing to the next? And again, going back to my own example of education, I work with a lot of people who don't want to mess with computers. They don't like technology. Well, today, I'm sorry to tell you, as much as I respect your intelligence and your experience, your skill set is not relevant right now. It's not relevant without being coupled with the technology that we need to deliver to students. So I've actually been pushing for hybrid sort of classes for years now, partly, I should say partly, mostly, because of just how well it works with students who need to work at their own pace in certain classes. And now how nice it is where a lot of the classes that I'm working with right now, we can just switch to a virtual delivery without a problem. Certainly there are still adjustments required, but I encourage you, going forward, before we go to questions and answers, just to think about, I'd like to end with some kind of fun. Here's a quote from John Bon Jovi from his song, It's My Life. One of the lines of that song is, tomorrow's getting harder, make no mistake. Luck, it ain't enough. You got to make your own breaks. So go out there, make your own breaks. Have a successful year. Hopefully there's a few things to think about. I'll look forward to answering your questions. And Yanya, are you going to jump back in for this portion?
Sure. I mean, I can go forward.
I have to go to the, if I can look at the chat here. Look at the chat. No
Okay.
question yet.
No
Is that right?
question. Yeah,
Okay.
no questions yet. I would invite everyone to write your questions in the chat section and let's discuss. I really liked your note on building on your assets and education being the primary one. So
I've tried to promote for years of students considering themselves as being lifetime learners. It's just not something, education is not something you finish. If it is, then that's where you run into this risk of being part of a certain specific skill in the labor force that gets replaced. Yeah. Anything can be outsourced. And I again, going back to education, a lot of what we consider teaching is a lot of times lecturing. Now, the lecture model could be changing in the very near future as we have a lot of online resources. And of course, that doesn't mean that we don't need educators. That means that we need education to change and to evolve.
okay, we have some questions coming in.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Question. Okay. Is this time going to be a faster recovery since technology, know-how, etc., are way more developed, like in 2000, 2009, etc.? Is there hope that the real life sector will get faster on track? Yeah. Yeah, there is hope for that. I'm encouraged, actually, by the fact that even though there are millions of jobless claims, the actual unemployment rate is not jumping up as high as I was expecting. People are talking about a 5 percentage point increase in unemployment. I think 5 percentage points, that's very manageable. Back in the Great Recession of 2008, we reached, in the US, we reached about 9.9, I think it hit over 10 at one point, percent. The Great Depression was 25%. So if we're still staying with single digit on inflation, I think that's great. The fact that we're more developed, I think that's a very key point. Look at what technology is allowing us to do right now. Look at the fact that we are all connected with our machines in a way that we never could have been decades ago. In the epidemic of 1918, It's not like you could just get online and get your updates. You couldn't just shift to online. There was no online. So it's actually a real nice blessing that this thing waited to arrive at a point where a lot of the things that we do can shift online, and that we can move nimbly from one thing to the other. I mean, never forget that if you look back at the richest people, the wealthiest people in the history of the planet, you look at kings and Rockefellers. These people didn't have laptops. These people didn't have internet. I mean, it's amazing. We have more power at our fingertips than many people of the past. You can run a global corporation from your laptop. It's spectacular. So never, ever forget that you have incredible opportunities that other people before us never had. So yeah, I'm very encouraged, but I hope that the takeaway from this is very clear. We have this opportunity, but it's not just going to fall into our lap. We have to go get it. We have to be innovators now. We have to be thinkers and doers. We have to go out there and nimbly explore what is available to us. We cannot sit back and say, oh, I hope somebody gives me a job soon. You need to be the managers to go out, create those opportunities, and then hire other people that are not able to move as nimbly as you are. But yeah, I think there's hope, but there's so much uncertainty about where things are going from here. One other point that I wanted to mention in that last part is to don't wait. Really don't wait. Don't think, okay, this thing's going to open up in 6 weeks and then I'll do that. No, the time is now. Make your next bold step forward today somewhere, because we never know what is going to fundamentally change about the economy around us. We don't know what's coming back. Go out there and explore. I hope that addresses the question. But I'm very hopeful for those, for those who are ready and willing to innovate. Which sectors of the economy are likely to recover the fastest? There are a lot of sectors of the economy that don't need to recover at all. I mean, if you look at online retailers, Amazon is doing quite well. Of course, it already had over 40% of online retail sales. They're doing very well, and in fact, hiring more people now. Implicit in that question, which sectors of the economy are likely to recover the fastest? This is where I think, if I'm reading this right, we're going back to the idea of when this is over, right? So when this is over, what's going to recover? I think the strongest sectors, the strongest areas of the economy are going to be people who are recovering now. They're moving themselves to being part of this new economy. Maybe it will change back, maybe it won't. But we've got restaurants out here that are, put up glass on their windows and they're serving meals, as a storefront. You can't go in to the store, but you can still serve meals. So they're innovating. They're working with what they have. Other than that, I know you're looking for specific sectors likely to recover the fastest. That's really hard to say. It's hard to say if we just look at markets, but with something like I mentioned airlines, they're already looking for a bailout. Now, do they get the bailout? Do they not? If not, do we just let all of the airlines go bust? Does the government nationalize the airlines? Or do we just give them a bailout, which is what happened in the investment banking sector in the 2008 crisis, which allowed some to fail, some to survive. Based on those decisions of a few people, sector recovery is going to vary widely. So again, that just points to, more uncertainty about the future. One says, I work in tourism, and it does not look good right now. Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. No, that's absolutely the case. Of course, if you're in a country where travel is restricted and a lot of non-essential businesses are shut down, then tourism is absolutely at a standstill. So the rest of this comment or question, my entire education and skills are connected to it. Does it make sense to change course of my profession, or is it to find something smaller inside of it that might make sense in these circumstances? The question relates to your shift. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I, I'm in a similar situation as you are as far as education. Right? You say, this is what I do. It's not like I could just switch and be a nuclear physicist tomorrow or something like this. Um, the travel and tourism. First of all, I will tell you that I am very optimistic that travel and tourism is going to come back uh, quickly because people are going to demand that very fast. I have plans. I have places I wanted to travel for this summer. People are going to generally they're getting vouchers for their travel that were canceled, so that they can still take that trip at a later time. I'm going to take those trips at a later time. Everybody, after being in lockdown, is going to want to get out there and travel. So I think you're going to be very much in demand in coming months. What I would encourage you to do, though, is to, again, don't try to put a timeline on this. Don't try to say, okay, I'm going to be back in full swing by August. Don't know that. But what sorts of things are necessary now? What sort of things are needed right now? Perhaps there are people out there who want to learn a language. As just an example, somebody out there, maybe there's this team. Say, okay, we need to work on our language skills in this company. These people need to learn this language. We have to have somebody learning Slovenian. You say, oh, well, I can do that. I can help people learn Slovenian. Well, of course you can, and you can give lessons online. You can do these things on Skype, on Zoom, on Teams, on WebEx. So perhaps language training is something that you can take care of in the meantime. If you look for the gig economy, there's a certain infographic out there, which I really like, and it gives you hundreds of different companies that are out there as part of the gig economy. Of course, one is Uber. Well, that's not an option right now, but other things like language training is definitely an option, and I would expect that to pick up as long as people are stuck in their homes and wanting to do something to where they can reach out, they can have some sort of human connection and learn a new skill. Why not? One of many, many options. So again, just treasure hunt. I think travel and tourism, it goes away, maybe for 2 years. Okay. What else would you like to do? What else would be interesting to try? Something that life coaching or these different things. But move to something else very, very soon, or start moving to something else very, very soon. A question. What's your prediction regarding online education? Do you believe most will switch to distance learning in the next year or two? Yeah, that's a great question. And this is, something that I am thinking about. We have a lot of students now that are able to do their classes virtually because we're forced to do it virtually. I'm actually teaching in a group that was very reluctant to try any sort of virtual or online education, even though I wanted to try it. Now here we are forced to try it. So I'm having fun with it. We're doing very well. But will most switch to, if we're able to be in the same room at the same time, something like an MBA classroom, when I teach MBA classes, it's not about information transfer. It's not about just, here's something on a slide that you could read in a book, but instead come here and I'm going to read it to you. MBA classes are about discussion and exploration of topics, picking apart the details, applying models to real life situations. And there's a richness of the discussion that happens in the room. Now, we can do that virtually. And we have. I've run MBA classrooms virtually for a couple of weekends. But, there's also a little bit of separation that is unfortunate. It's not quite the same as being in the room. So, no, I think that there's still going to be a place for the traditional classroom. But I'm very encouraged that, forcing us to move a lot of class or all classes virtual is going to help us to realize, what worked well, what didn't. Where are we actually seeing benefits? Look at the efficiencies. Probably this is too long of an answer, I suppose. But real quickly, in economics, I like to talk about implicit cost. Okay, the implicit cost of something. If you go and buy something at the store that costs $10, that's explicit. But the implicit cost is the time and the hassle of having to go there, pick it up, and this sort of thing. It's the same way with classes. If I go teach a class, I gotta get ready to go, head out the door, travel to the university, set everything up, do the class, tear everything down, get home, and all this extra time is costly. Now, when I can just open up my laptop on my couch and say, welcome to class, it's convenient for me. It's convenient for the students who are in many different countries right now and still part of the same group. So there are some benefits there that I don't know that we're going to want to lose right away. There are some efficiencies that we're going to want to capture. Fully online by 2028, I don't think we're ever going to leave fully the traditional classroom. I wouldn't expect that. What, in your opinion, are the skills and knowledge of the future? The biggest skills for the future, I don't think have changed at all. One of them is soft skills. One of them is logic skills. Before we came into this whole thing, I kept throwing coding out at my students. People who were studying business and didn't know exactly what to do. I said, have you looked at Python? #1 programming language in the world. Get into coding a little bit. Forcing yourself to do that teaches you some logic skills. You can go to Coursera.org right now and try a coding class. And that's the sort of thing where, especially now, right now we're dealing with all these tech issues. If you understand how to work with technology in ways that others don't, you could be a consultant right now for these teams that have to be online. Whoever is working in hospitality and tourism, there's another example. Work with a corporation to say, I can help you connect your team. I've worked in virtual teams before. The dynamics are different. I can help you. I can coach you through this. What about the idea that people are not spending much right now? When the stores will open, business will boost like crazy. Is that a possibility? Yeah, that's a possibility. There are a lot of non-essential shopping that people are putting off right now, rightfully so, they should, that they're going to go out and take care of when things open up again. I fully expect that. The other side of the coin, though, is that there are, a lot of people have lost income. Again, there's a real loss of GDP from this whole thing. So in as much as some of us would like to go travel, we're going to be facing a little less wealth than is typically the case. So some households are going to simply say, look, we maybe can't afford to travel over the next year. So yeah, if you've got the means, then I would say absolutely go out there and do your part to stimulate the economy. It's not crazy, no. I would expect that spending is going to be vibrant. And I'll tell you one other piece as to why is because the politicians love to throw money at things like this. We're already doing that. In the U.S., they're just ready to throw trillions of dollars out there to try to keep the economy moving. So there's going to be cash. The problem is more cash out there, more debt. These things eventually have to be paid one way or the other. Cover for industries, thanks. Green technologies, organic food, yeah. Opportunity costs, absolutely. Opportunity costs, there's our implicit costs. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. If that's it is a little unnerving to have this session where you don't hear a single voice. Oh, good. Yanya's going to join.
I'm back.
I can hear another human voice. Fantastic.
We could ask everyone to turn their microphones on and have a party.
Yeah. I thought we were doing that at 2 o'clock, actually.
Yeah. Okay. If there's no more questions, I would like to thank everyone for joining us, and a special thank you to you, Aaron. It was great, especially now to see all your passion when you're answering the questions.
Teaching is fun.
Yeah, I see.
I love being in the classroom. I love exchanging ideas. It's just fantastic. So thank you to everybody who joined today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We hope this was time well spent for you and you got some value out of it. We have many more events coming on, so follow us on social media, on our website, and let's stay in touch. Have a great afternoon, and take care, be safe, be healthy, and go
Yes,
for
absolutely. Do that. Flatten the curve, and let's get this opened eventually with everybody healthy.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I've seen these pictures of Ljubljana, and think, oh, this is what I'm going to see. And now here I am just staring in this front of my flat. It's not fair.
You will see it soon enough.
Eventually.
We are looking forward to hosting you in Ljubljana. So.
Absolutely.
Hope to see you soon, and hope to see everybody soon as well at one of our other events. So have a nice afternoon, and see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.